Here to break it down with my panel today, we have, of course, Orlando Watson, Spokesman and Communications Director for Black Media at the Republican National Committee. We also have Judith Brown Diane as co-director of the Advancement Project, and Dr. Jason Johnson, Professor of Political Science at Hiram College. All right, folks, glad y'all here.
I'm glad you are, too. I'm going to throw the first question to the apparently nonpartisan person, Dr. Johnson.
Oh, no, he's very partisan. He's very partisan.
I'm just opinionated.
I thought I had everybody's partisan abilities figured out here. But really, was this a vote against the president's and the Democrats' agenda, or was it against the inaction of Washington?
It was against the inaction of Washington. Look, you got to look at the fact that only 13% of the population approves of the job that Congress is doing.
Even lower than the president's approval.
Exactly, lower than the president's approval rating. You also have to pay attention to the fact that, Barack Obama himself only mattered to about 33% of the voters. The rest of the people said he really didn't come into play. So I don't think it's a repudiation of him. And when you consider what happened with legalizing marijuana and raising the minimum wage, clearly Obama's policies are fine, even in red states. Certain people just don't like him.
So that was the case, Orlando, in terms of, because again, Republicans used Obama, even Rush Limbaugh on his radio show, a broken clock is right twice a day. Even he said that it wasn't about governing, it was about not liking Obama.
Well, it was about the president's policies, which the president himself said were on the ballot. Now, these are policies that Democrat senators who are running in this week's election supported more than 90% of the time. So it was a repudiation of the Democrats and their failed policies. They just haven't worked. The Democrats ran on hope and change in 2008 and 2012, but now people today are disappointed, disillusioned, and disapprove of the job that was done.
I think Judith might disapprove of what you just said.
That's that 1/3 that voted, right? I mean, the president pointed out 2/3 of you didn't vote.
How do you interpret them, though? How do you say what they want?
Well, I mean, I think the 2/3 that didn't vote, I mean, midterms, we always have serious fall off in elections. And so we cannot extrapolate from what this meant. We can't say that this was a mandate. What we can say is that Congress hasn't done its job. What we can say is that the president actually doesn't put laws before Congress. Congress puts laws before Congress. And so he's taking a blame when actually Congress should be taking a blame, the Republicans as well as the Democrats. And the Democrats actually, they didn't do such a great job in turnout. But if you look at places like North Carolina, there was, African Americans came out at 19% share of the vote like they had in past midterm elections. I think that, in fact, we're seeing more ground game, especially in places like North Carolina, because of the protests, the Moral Mondays protest.
But the problem here wasn't a question of black voters. The problem was white folks.
Exactly.
I mean, the reality is, you look at Michelle Nunn in Georgia, she barely got 25% of white voters there. You look at, in fact, 80% of the people without who graduated from college voted for David Perdue, and 80% of whites, 70% of whites with a college degree voted for David Perdue. And so you saw white voters in a lot of places across the country saying, forget Democrats, going straight for the GOP. Why?
Well, because they're unhappy, and that's the thing. Like, I get what Orlando says, I get what Judith says, but there's a general sense of disgust going on, and I think if you look at this electorate, the electorate that comes out in midterms is different from the electorate that you get during a presidential election. They're almost photo negatives of each other at this particular point. So Obama plays some role in this, but his policies, again, his policies were appreciated in most of these locations. People voted against their own interests, but they wanted his policies.
And in fact, Orlando, you had states that actually passed the minimum wage.
Yeah.
Right, that's absolutely right. But again, going back to the turnout, which Judith mentioned, I think the turnout problem is a voter enthusiasm problem, and voters just weren't enthusiastic about this election. The main thing being, they don't know what the Democrats have delivered on.
You're talking about the Democrats not being able to get the white vote. Republicans have never been able to get a black vote, but now they seem to be moving in that direction. Orlando, that's obviously not an accident.
It's not. It's something that we've made a conscious commitment to. We've invested time and resources and money into it at the Republican National Committee. We've started earlier than before. We've improved on our ground game. We've hired black staffers, people from the community who live in the community and
who aren't afraid to say I'm black and I'm Republican.
Who are advocates for our message, a message of opportunity, a message of opening up access to the avenues of upward mobility.
But we'll see how that works in 2016. I mean, because at the end of the day, like you said, the electorate's different for a presidential election. What will happen is, when Republicans take over a Congress, they go buck wild, right? And they go buck wild and become very extremist. So a part of the problem for the Republican Party is going to be the fight over the soul of the Republican Party. How far right is the party going to go before the presidential election?
But on this whole point, though, in terms of where Democrats are, I think also in this election, Democrats made serious mistakes. And that is, if you look at the map, Republicans freaked out after 2012, but they ran a number of state legislatures, a number of governor's matches as well. Same thing in this midterm election. Democrats do not have a 50-state strategy. And so they're getting crushed on the state level. That's where voter suppression is taking place. Yes. That's where Medicaid expansion is being debated. That's where all these other issues. It's not happening here. The real battles are happening in state capitals, and Democrats are in a position where Florida, supermajority for the Republicans, but they have 28-5 advantage in the Tennessee State Senate. Democrats have got to probably call Howard Dean and say, can you please dust off that plan you had, Jason?
Roland is into the 50-state strategy. I want to warn you now.
When you got destroyed on Tuesday, the map is the map.
It's the only way you can win. And look, and I talk about this all the time. We can't ignore the elephant in the room. Okay, you got a lot of low-level sort of racial hostility. A lot of these things that we see about voter suppression, there's tons of research that shows this is about repressing black voters, repressing Latino voters. All of those things happen on the state level. There has to be more responsibility, not just from the Democratic Party, but from African Americans and minorities in general, to vote at the local level. If there's anything we learned from Ferguson and what happened with George Zimmerman, your county attorney, your state's attorney, your state reps, those races matter too. And I think that's a big loss for a lot of people in this country.
And the Democratic Party.
Hold tight 1 second. Got to pay a couple of bills. Got to pay a couple of bills. We come back, though. We're going to continue to talk about the midterm elections, but we're also going to deal with what happened in your state of Illinois.
Oh, now it's
Tuesday election, huge nightmare for Democrats, and shouldn't somebody get fired, take the blame?
You always want to fire somebody. Some people are saying the person who's going to be the face of the Democrats' election failure is going to be...
Y'all want to show a picture today?
It's a mystery. Okay. And this is just speculation. She's not been fired. We want to clarify this. Democratic National Committee Chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Should she really be the one to blame, though? Let's get the panel back on this one. You know, we don't know what went on in the back rooms, but
yeah, when you lose big, somebody's head's got somebody's head's going to roll. And yesterday, the president was asked that question, and he said it's a bit premature. Let's find out what the Republicans are going to do with their agenda. And you got some Democrats who are saying he's not going to replace anybody on his White House staff. You don't hear anything about when it comes to the head of the DNC. Congressman Steve Israel has already said he is not going to continue as chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. But Utah lost in Utah. Bennett is the senator from Utah. I'm sorry, your leadership sucks.
Look, Democrats have already thrown DWS under the bus, and we felt sorry for her. And that was before the election night. Now you've got a Republican tidal wave.
Everybody, your party, everybody, your campaign got a promotion.
Nobody.
It's the head of the DNC. We felt bad for her. Oh. But I think what you're going to see.
Right.
Like just as a system, you know. Okay.
But look, what we've done at the RNC is we've implemented this 50-state strategy that you're talking about, and the Democrats didn't. They came into our communities, black communities across the country, with these last-minute appeals, a couple of print ads, a little bit of radio, thinking that they could gin up African-American support. And they weren't able to do that. I mean, we saw Governor Kasich in Ohio get 33% of the black male vote. 1 out of 3 black men voted for Governor Kasich in Ohio. 26% of all black voters in that state voted for the Republican Governor Kasich in Ohio.
This had to be started long before this election cycle. You can't just go into black people's communities and say, vote for me, I care about you. This, we understand, Bruce Rauner in Illinois did this. He started years ago cultivating some relationships, which then came to pay off when election time came.
That's right, and it's about building those relationships, which is something that we encourage for every Republican to do, for every elected official to do. And that's something that we should be doing more.
Judith, should the Democrats be looking at making some significant changes to your leadership? Because clearly, I mean, again, going beyond, I'm going way beyond Republicans taking control of the United States Senate. When you lose in deep blue states like Massachusetts governor, Maryland governor,
I live in Maryland.
Illinois governor. When you look at expanding in Florida, when you look at those types of wins, that's the sign of a structural problem for the party.
So first, I do not speak for the Democratic Party.
I don't know, but you're giving analysis.
But I do think that part of the problem is that we think about civic participation in cycles, and those are election cycles tied to year in and year out. Is it a presidential election? Is it a midterm election? What we don't do is talk to the voters in between. We don't, kind of cultivate relationships and build with them so that they understand that we are by their side, that we're working for them day in and day out. So I think actually everyone
sometimes
deserves
that's because
some
they're
of this
not
blame.
working for them day in and day out. They really don't have a narrative.
That is true, right? But so part of this is about how do we form accountability both ways? How do voters keep engaged in the process beyond Election Day? But how do the parties and the candidates continue to be accountable to the people who voted them into office?
Jason?
Look, I wish the parties made sense when it came to their leaders, because think about it. You all got rid of Michael Steele after you won in 2010. He had done a great job. So real talk. So it doesn't always make sense. Nancy Pelosi should have been gone in 2010, and Michael Steele should have kept his job. So I think if the Democrats are smart, they need to look from top to bottom. They need to also take a look at some of the candidates they're running. I mean, how could they get behind Charlie Crist? How could they get behind some of the people that they have? Martha Coakley, who's a two-time loser. You know, she and Scott Brown are a perfect combination for people who keep running and keep losing. So I think the Democrats need to stop just saying we're going to win in 2016 with Hillary Clinton and look at tougher, better, more responsible candidates at the state level. That's a big part of it.
The other thing is the Democratic Party hedged its bets, right, about President Obama, right? Don't have him out on the trail, right? But, you know, for black folks, that was
no, but
no one wanted him with him.
But here's the deal. It's not just black folks. Not just black folks. I mean, I understand there were some other Democratic candidates who were white, who were running, who wanted the White House to be involved. And they wanted him to be in, but again, they made this ridiculous strategy. But also, they got the president involved in this thing late.
Yeah,
they got involved late. I mean, he didn't even do black radio until really late in the campaign. And I'm sitting there going, "Hey, you might want to start a long time before early voting."
They hedged their bets on let's keep him in the White House and not out on the trail.
I wouldn't call it hedging bets. I would call it taking voters for granted. They thought they could show up at the last minute with these sort of appeals and get the same turnout that they had in the past, which didn't happen. In Massachusetts, in Maryland, in Illinois, you had Republicans on the ticket who were in black communities. Baker in Massachusetts, he was in Boston. Ron in Illinois, working with black pastors. Hogan in Maryland, his LG candidate is a black Republican, Boyd Rutherford, who just won.
Look, you can't show up at my house at 11:55 at night with flowers and say, let's go out. Okay, that's what we're talking about here. Okay?
You know what kind of call that is.
I mean,
let's call it some kind of call.
So that's what you might be saying in. And that's what voters did. That's what voters did. They
unless you're crazy.
So, I mean, there was so much of that. I spend time in Ohio. I spend time a lot of time in Atlanta as well. You know, President Obama and the First Lady, they showed up, but they called radio stations late, you know. And in Ohio, it was the same sort of thing. Yes, the Republicans have been working in Ohio, but it's also because, you know, the Democratic candidate was an absolute failure in Ohio.
Totally imploded.
They had nothing going on. And their most popular candidate, Nina Turner, who a lot of people in the black community love, she was abandoned by the Democratic Party.
But
lost 61-35.
We accuse it on both sides. We say he wouldn't go out for candidates, and then we say candidates didn't want to have anything to do with him. So I don't know.
Right. My point is their infrastructure was totally dysfunctional, and they had no idea what in the world they wanted to do, and it was all over the place. And then when you didn't have a consistent narrative, earlier we talked to Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. And when I interviewed First Lady Michelle Obama, when they laid out all of the accomplishments, and as I'm listening to Reverend talk, I'm literally visualizing a commercial that actually is showing that.
Should have been.
And I'm sitting there, I'm going, that would have made a hell of a television commercial.
In fact, the president's own speech yesterday was like pointing out all the things I've done.
Would have been good.
Hello, we could have done that like months ago.
So all the consultants that were paying thousands and millions of dollars, what the hell were y'all doing?
We'll listen to what the Reverend had to say this morning, because he put it in a nutshell.
Going to break right now. We come back. We're going to talk about that, specifically a group of black pastors who supported Bruce Rauner for governor.
Early on.
He won. Should Democrats be a wee bit scared of this happening in other places? And so we'll deal with that when we come back. It's 20.